you want to be. Perfect. Thank you.
Is this still okay for you?
What's that?
Right there.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you both for being here today. Also, what I didn't say in Michael Birch's opening, but they broke the internet because they were our first online virtual creative mornings, and we didn't have enough spaces and we had to buy Zoom. Because when Michael Birch actually presented, they had 450 people, and then it just kind of went up from there afterward. It was just kind of, it was very crazy, and we became the model for global creative mornings on how to do things. And Jolinda offered up our free our Zoom account for other chapters to host as well. So kind of, there's a little fun fact that you might not know about Michael Birch. So I want to start with both of you. Both of you work in spaces that foster human connection. You do this in different ways. How do you see your work as threads that weave people together?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, you can go.
Good morning. Yeah, it's great to be here with all of you. Y'all are definitely a uplift in community and spirit and soul right now. So it's really cool to look at you. So it's interesting because my old bio used to say that I was a builder and a weaver of whatever the things were. That's like what my bio read. But one thing that has been reigning really present is the interdependence and the interconnection of humans amongst all of the different ways that we can connect, right? So across our, of course, human lines of ethnicity and race or age, or how do we connect with ourselves, mind, body, spirit, and soul? How do we then connect and weave into our families or our communities or our workplaces or the systems and the institutions that we work within? And so a lot of the work that I've had the honor to steward first has started with the interconnection that I first and foremost have to have with myself. And then also realizing the interdependence in the spaces that I get the honor to show up in. And that to me is kind of really where the work has landed in my personal life. And then when it comes to the Well Collective, and I guess I could go back forth, is that this is also the 9-year anniversary of my previous organization, which is Bare Soul. And so in October 31st of this year, a couple of weeks ago, I decided to close out that chapter. And so it was historically known as creating accessible and approachable, both yogic principle and practices within institutions and for a general community. But when you lead, and what I did a lot during that time was really looking at what was the need of community, right? Like really meeting the deficits in community. And by deficits, I mean who was represented in wellness and who wasn't, right? Where was wellness accessible? Where was education around wellness accessible? Who had and who didn't have? So it was really a deficit focus, and let's meet that deficit by just bringing people together and building community from that standpoint. As I have led and really evolved into this space of the Well Collective, our whole real mission has been to focus on the strengths of people and really look at where and how we can reimagine and re-envision what's in front of us. And so there's a need that's being met with that, but how do we weave people together that are in the practice of reimagining who they are, who we are individually, re-envisioning how we can show up. And then how do we then work together to then create impactful, transformative change? And so that's kind of where I am landing when it comes to weaving together in this moment.
Beautiful. I think you
Love
need
that.
Wow.
Now I gotta follow that.
Yeah. All right, Michael Birch.
I put sequins on things. I don't know. What was the question again?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. How do you see your work as threads that weave people together?
I love it. Okay, I can do that. Thank you guys for having me, by the way. Yeah, so my work is all embroidery and textile based. It very much is like a lone solo practice of mine. I spend hours and hours in my studio by myself. But I have this practice where I embroider portraits of people with my sewing machine, which started as just like something in my studio, just hanging out with friends, and has blown up into this whole career where I travel the world and go to events, and I'll stitch 100 portraits of random people in a night, and they all take 3 to 5 minutes. I'm sitting here at a sewing machine and connecting with each person for these like really short little snippets of time. And so for me, all of that's about connection. All of that's thinking about how do I connect with this person across from me? How do I have this really intense conversation with them? How do I study their entire face while I'm speaking to them? That I'm like following the lines of their eyes into their nose, down to their lips and their hair, really taking them in, getting to know them, and using this machine as a conduit, which I feel like when I started doing it, it was all this this research based in like the hand versus the machine, and what is handcraft and what is machine-made things, and how do we find authenticity in a technological world where everything is digitized, everything is virtual, and so I'm just trying to like use a machine to create something that feels handmade and feels authentic. And so I don't know. I think it's cool, like this like loud, clunky, like pile of plastic and metal parts and threads and stuff that I get to like really connect with people at like big crazy events where there's like never any time to stop and hear people think. It's also really cool when I do stuff at the Oscars and I get to like sit down with Helen Mirren for 5 minutes. Like that's cool connection. But oh God, I was going somewhere with that and then I forgot. I made a joke and then, but yeah, and then the artwork that you're left with in these moments, it's not even, I don't think it's that special. It's like a doodle with the sewing machine. It's just a single line drawing of your face. But what it is that the art isn't that object that you take with you. It's the memory of the connection that we had in that moment of creating. And so that is what's important for me more so than whether or not this picture looks anything like you. Because a lot of times, like I just drew with your sewing machine. Like I don't care if it looks like you, right? I did redo Shaquille O'Neal's portrait though. I screwed up his big bald head and I had to like redo it. But yeah, and then all my other work above and beyond that cool party trick work is about identity. It's about queerness. It's about living a trans existence, and I think about all the ways that we craft our own identities and our own sense of self the way that a couture gown is crafted, and like using the same care and thoughtfulness and skill to create who I am, coming out as a non-binary trans person and representing myself and all of these things, and the way that allows me to connect to other people is really powerful, in the way it allows me to tell my story without having to like tell my story, and I can just say, look at the pretty sequins, and that allows you to kind of see the artifice that I create to create this, but also the authenticity and the truth that's within that artifice, and how whatever we put on to kind of create who we are in a given day, even if that's fake, that's very real. That the desire to be fake is something that's very personal and intimate. So that's what all of that work is about. It's all about connecting with people. It's never about just who I am. It's about who I am in the light of the people that are seeing me and interacting with me.
It sounds a little bit more than just putting sequins on things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Michael Birch, I actually want to ask you this first, because I want to hear a little bit about how teaching influences your artistic practice, and also vice versa, because you are an educator as well. So, Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I am an assistant professor of fashion design and merchandising at VCU. And I've been there for 11 years now. And it was never my plan to be a teacher. I was in Richmond for 6 months 12 years ago and was like, somebody asked me to teach a class adjunct, and now it's snowballed into a whole thing. But I love teaching and interacting with my students because it keeps me sharp. It keeps me practicing all of these skills and making sure that I'm always growing as an artist because I have to help them grow. I love passing on my knowledge and all of my training to them, and then getting to see what they create with it, and getting to see like what that inspiration then like does back to me. Like I've totally stolen little things from students every once in a while. They're like, ooh, what did you just do with those beads? Okay, let me see like what I can do with that. Right. So I love teaching, and I love not just teaching the skills, but teaching creative thinking, and like how do we look at the world, and how do we impact the world with what we do. I teach a class called Gender Nonconforming Fashion, where we spend the first 5 weeks of the class not even making anything. It's just reading articles, watching movies, having guest speakers, having discussion topics and stuff, and figuring out who is the queer community, what do trans people need in their clothes, and how can we design for them? How can we build a world that they can exist in freely? How do we, give them dresses with pockets their hands can fit in? Like, it's like little thoughtful things. And so that's really incredible. And through teaching is really where, okay. I came to know my trans identity through my students. I don't know.
You're gonna
I spent years not understanding my gender and my identity and who I am and where I fit in this world. And it was it was teaching these students, it was teaching Gen Z who are so open and so free with their genders and their identities and their sexuality, and seeing the ways that they get to express themselves in ways that I was never allowed to. So teaching is so personal to me because of the things that I learned from the students. That seeing that non-binary was a word and a thing that existed was because of little queer kids. And so I love the work that I get to do.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. Ashley, similarly and differently, teaching.
No, make them cry.
I know. I am usually always crying. I'm surprised I have not cried as soon as I open my mouth. So here we go.
Okay, here we go.
What you got for me?
So I'm going to switch up a question. I didn't even send you this one.
Oh,
we're doing this. I told you this was the baseline. We're in it, guys. You also educate and teach, and how you connect and with your own practices. Your story started through wanting to understand your relationship to the world, but also through a lens of grief, through a lens of,
oh gosh, here you go.
I'm sorry, girl.
Wow.
When you know somebody for a long time, you actually know how to make them cry too. But through a lens of grief, but also through a lens of love. And so I was wondering if you'd like to share how teaching has evolved from your genesis of starting Bare Soul, and now transitioning into being the founder and leader at the Well Collective, or the collective, part of the collective at the Well Collective. And share a little bit about your experience with that.
Yeah, so I've told this story many times, so I'll be brief on the inception aspect, but a lot of my identity shifted in 2013 when I lost my aunt to cancer. And that's moved forward in the way of the contemplative practices and faith and supportive community are the ways that I moved through that, but in real ways. It was an invitation to really build a relationship with grief. And so that is what led me to my own space, but seeking spaces that then also offered how to move through grief as well. And it just wasn't present for me. Like I looked around and I didn't see them, or they just weren't at like arm's reach. And so that's how I invited myself into a deeper practice, doing a lot of movement, seeking a lot of like creative ways to express myself, learning how to communicate what was happening in my body in ways that other people could hear me, versus the opposite of that is like either isolating, which is what I was doing at first, or, you know, having very delicious, creatively made cocktails, and things like that, or, you know, being, just doing like ratchet stuff probably. You know, at some point in time, you have to get over yourself, and get really real. And so,
At some point in time, you have to get over yourself.
yeah. And, you know, that's really been my philosophy. And, it's been really important for me over the years to create spaces for people to build relationship with themselves, to really not just to take care of themselves. I think that's like the easiest thing that we can do. And by easy, I mean, I'm naming that also acknowledging all of the systemic barriers that get in the way of certain demographics and our own mental barriers that get in the way of us taking care of ourselves. So I want to name that. But beyond the taking care of ourselves at the very basis, there's this opportunity to really get to know like who we are, like what habits did we bring into our lives, what habits were passed down from our parents or generations, what ways of beings, what ways of beings are helpful for us or unhelpful for us, what communities do we land in versus what communities we don't land in because of a previous experience or engagement. And so the invitation was to create spaces where we dive deep into our identity. And over the past couple of years, specifically after 2020, well, really 2019 in my world, I started doing a lot of work around my own personal identity beyond like sitting down in meditation and writing and my own creative practices of, you know, reading books and then reflecting on them and how it referred to my life. And so I started doing work on like history, like really diving deep into history and really diving deep of the history of my family, diving deep into the history of my childhood, really diving deep into the history of our country, really diving deep into the history of Richmond. And I got really curious. And because I like to sit down and read and do those things, that was cool, but I started inviting myself into like all of these creative spaces to kind of really learn in a different way that brought me into life. And that's what I desired for other people. And so the more that I started learning about my own identity and then also being in spaces where challenge was being brought up when people didn't necessarily know themselves or we were making decisions off of false senses of ourselves. And so that's where a lot of the leadership development programming and stuff came from, and education. So we started really simple with like professional developments within school spaces or leadership spaces or general community spaces within the well of, you know, yeah, we might sit down and meditate, but then what comes after the meditation? Oh, what came up for you? How did that feel? Oh, like how are you going to act on what came up for you outside of your world? So diving a bit deeper beyond just the practice was really important. I think another thing is creating this space around how to be in like communication with other people around like what's helpful for us and what's not helpful for us, but having to do that in a creative way, because I think depending on what community we're in, we might shut down or be resistant to change. And so creating ways that we could work together then change. And so that's shown up over the past couple of years as like artwork and exhibits. It's shown up as music and inviting people in through song. It's shown up in giving opportunity to then create our own artwork. We do this activity where you sit down and we ask like, who are you now? Where do you want to be in 5 years? And how are you going to get there? But we do it through drawing, right? And that's just, it's so interesting what comes from mind onto paper versus what comes through word, because we're so limited through word and dialogue sometimes, and we miss all of the other things that are in our bodies. So it's been really important for me to invite in creative ways to do deep identity work so we can be in better relationship with each other.
Amazing. I think both of you talked a little bit now about identity and creative expression. So I want to bring those things together. How do you envision your work evolving to meet the changing needs of communities and their creative expression? Because we have, we're going forward from today. So how is the evolution? How do you envision your evolution?
For me, it's really, and I think you named this, is around like leadership, right? And so I've really been redefining what leadership looks like, specifically because of the way in which our world is landing in this moment. I invite in that invitation to that we're all leaders, right? Like, and we all have creativity, and creativity is the expression of liberation and freedom. Like, our creativity is a display of limitless boundaries. Like, we can actually create whatever we want to create if we just decide and commit to it. And so when I think about leadership in this moment, one shift is like, how can we all own our own lives and own our creativity and gifts to then be in collaborative leadership with each other, and just thinking about what it looks like with the word solidarity. So Vanessa's sitting right here. She leads our culture of justice. Vanessa Cole, she's phenomenal, but she's the director of culture and community at The Well. And she's doing a lot of work around what does justice mean? Like, we think justice is this big word and that you have to be like in politics to move towards justice sometimes, or there's so many problems that, what's the one thing that we can do? And she brings up this concept of solidarity, right? And so one thing that we say a lot is like solidarity over charity. And in this moment, what's been at the top of the mind is then how do we all how do we own our own roles in being in solidarity with one another, because we see each other's humanity? And how do we use our creativity, like our own gifts within our bodies, our voices, our music, our art, our hardships, our challenges, the things that like we do really well, and also the things, and being vulnerable with the things that we actually have not done well with at all. But how do we take all of that to then address the systemic inequities that that we're all facing, right? If we look at it, we have an inequity of our humanity. So
Beautiful. Yeah. Michael Birch, what about you? How do you see?
Not that deep.
I know.
Tell us more.
I love that. I
just use a lot of words.
No, it's great. It's perfect. I don't know. It's like the question again. God, she talked so long.
I know.
How do you envision your work evolving to meet the
You've had
changing
3
needs
words.
of
I know.
communities?
Yeah.
In creative expression.
I mean, I think my work is personal. My work is about my own journey and my own life and how I express my identity and my queerness and my sequins. And so I think my work just evolves as I evolve and as I grow as a person in this world, as I interact with other people, my work changes and grows with that. And I hope that the work continues to connect with people as the world changes. I think this summer I just did a residency in Paris, and because my work is so much about my identity and how I interact with other people, it was a really cool research opportunity for me to sort of like document my life and my interactions with people in a completely new country. Not completely, I've been there a lot, but like, my work is about like how do I craft my identity, right? Like what are the choices I make about who I am and where I belong and how do I express myself? And so making those decisions in a foreign country, in another language, with people I've never met, in situations I've never been in, sort of changed my perspective on my own identity and how I feel about myself. I remember I forgot to pack like electric clippers for my beard, and then ended up going through like 2 weeks of like wild gender dysphoria there because my beard was like way too big and I like didn't have a thing and like couldn't find the right beauty supply shop in the Marais to like and so like it started to affect the work I was making and how I was thinking and how I was interacting with people. And so yeah, I think that as my interactions with people change, my work develops and changes a lot. So I'm working on this whole new body of work right now that I'm debuting in Miami in 3 weeks. I'm losing my mind over it, but and it's all completely new. It's completely different. A totally different direction for me about the materials and techniques that I'm using in it. So I'm hoping that those pieces will express like a queerness and I don't know, and just a story of myself in a way that people can connect to, and then I hope that grows and changes with community and all that fun stuff. But it's selfish work. It's about me, in all honesty, and I just hope that people connect to it. And when people connect to it, I think that's really important. I want people to see their own stories in my work, even if it's a completely different story than what I'm trying to express with my work. If you see it and you connect to something in your own life that has nothing to do with my life, then I hope that happens. And I think that art is really powerful in its ability for people to come to it with all of their different stories and different experiences, that you don't have to have the same experiences as an artist to connect to that work.
That doesn't sound selfish either.
Okay, cool.
Self-work is not selfish a lot of the time, right? Because we are within community. So rapid fire.
Great.
One.
She's telling us we talk too much.
I know, basically.
It's like quickly now.
I got 3 words.
One creative practice that is part of your life today or this week that you'd like to share.
Yeah. Ritual and ceremony. That's easy. I'm done. Ritual and ceremony.
I like it. All right.
Yeah, rapid fire.
Okay. Michael Birch.
Rapidity, the soul of wit.
Creative practice. I have to create something every day. Like just repetition, practice. An artistic practice is a practice, and you have to practice it to do it. Yeah.
I think both of you have talked a little bit about when you find yourself and put that out there, what that does is it changes the relationships. This is not, it has to be a mini rapid fire.
Okay, good.
Do you have a wish, a vision, a hope for how your creative practice influences and or integrates in Richmond in the next few years and beyond? It doesn't have to be just in Richmond.
Yeah. I want Richmond to be the epicenter of radical healing work through restorative practice. I want us to be a global marker for that. Yeah. I truly believe that because we are the epicenter of oppression, which, I talk about lack, but we're the epicenter of the foundation of our country. And I think that we have a responsibility to do our own identity work, whether you're a transplant here, whether you're from here, whoever you are. If you are landing in Richmond, it's a critical time for us to be in responsibility of how we relate to the shared experience of America. And so the Well Center for Healing and Humanity is really what I hope holds that. And so we're located and will be located in Chaco Bottom in the financial district. And the real intention of it is it to be a place where we gather to do identity work, for us to gather to celebrate and restore ourselves back to whole. And when I say restore ourselves back to whole, I don't mean that we're crying on the floor. We are crying on the floor. We are grieving. We are very much grieving in this moment. I don't know. I'm not going to speak generally for everybody, but there are moments of grief that I think that we can all experience. And how can we learn how to be in good practice and sustainable practice with each other so that the work that we do, that our own individual work and how we do it together, then shifts the experience of our future generations. And so please look up The Well and The Well Collective. We are at the top of a $10 million campaign. We are 17% there in this moment. But we're hosting a lot of events in which that it's bringing people together. Yes, on the program side, but really talking about the importance of what does solidarity really mean right? We're doing a lot of good work in Richmond. We have a lot of collaborative art. We have a lot of programs. We have a lot of things that are going on. But what does it mean when we actually take all of the good things that we have going on and bring them together?
Beautiful. Thank you. Michael Birch, how about you? You do work. I know that deserves a lot of applause. Well, you take your work you do work in Richmond, and you do your work abroad, everywhere.
Yeah.
So what are you hoping that, like, what dream do you have or vision do you have as the landscape continues to unfold?
I mean, I just want to continue making my work and be selfish and do what I want to do.
Great.
But I also,
Yeah. There's a freedom in that.
I love it. I don't think about anybody else but me.
Yeah.
No, but I do spend a lot of time thinking about everybody else, like my students, and growing and nurturing their talents and seeing what they're putting out to the world. I love seeing them succeed and move on and have bigger, better careers than me. But I do a lot of work with Diversity Richmond here in town. I'm on the board of directors there, and I run the Iridian Gallery there, which is the first LGBTQ nonprofit art gallery in the South. And so I'm really passionate about not just showing my queer artwork and telling my queer story, but being this like hub and this space where we can nurture and uplift queer voices from Richmond and across the country, to bring those artists to the gallery and to show the breadth and vision and possibilities of the queer community and the work that we can create and the stories that we can tell. So I want to see that grow. That's like what I pour a lot of my heart and soul and energy into, and that's how I see myself, as like building community and the work that I do in Richmond and how I can impact our culture and our community and how we build things there. So if you guys haven't been there, you should really check out the Iridian Gallery. If you've ever been to Diversity Thrift Store, the big gay thrift store by the highway, there's a little art gallery in the back. And actually, there's no art in it till January. But so go in January and see it. But right now, there's like a holiday boutique for the thrift store that they're using our gallery for.
Well, we'll
so.
shout it out in January again.
Perfect. Yes.
I know that everybody is going to have a million questions for you, but guess what, guys? We don't have time for that today. So I'm going to invite a couple of different things, and then we'll wrap up together. First of all, please join us next month, second Friday, December 13th. We'll be back at Martin. Then also, I want to invite anybody who feels well and able, if you are in a folding chair, to take it with you when you leave and leave it out by the front of the building. So it was a lot of work to get them in here today, and we have to return them. And then third, I think the last thing I just want to echo, because I hear this through you, and typically I like to, wrap up with a moment, but it's almost like you both said the moment today. It's a brave act to be creative. And in all times, we actually rise in community and hold one another up. And I think both of you talk about that and actually put that together. As much as Michael Birch was saying that they are selfish, I don't think any of us heard that. Ashley, as you have always evolved and you've always brought people with you on every evolution. And I think that it's really important to call both of these things out, that your work is really centered on relationships with self and others, and bringing them together for a more well and artistic and creative world. And it's pretty beautiful.
You're so good with words.
I wish I did it for a living. I mean, but I think that for everyone here, we can commit to radical acts of art, and our voices, our words, our paintings. We will never put glitter and sequins on things quite like Michael Birch does. But even, Gail might. Our drawings, our music, our photography, our voices, our words, our things that we do, our movements, our cooking. I saw several people have the cooking thing, that they wanted to invite cooking back into their lives in the next month. In any way that we creatively express ourselves, we are bringing advocacy, peace, justice, empathy, and love, and live together. And I want to thank you both for weaving those themes into everything that you do in your lives. I'm in awe of both of you and how you do that. I would love it if you would just share maybe one last thing for our group, where they can, I know you both said where they can follow you and find you, But if you had to kind of complete the wish for the folk, for others and for yourself, you want to continue to make. But if you had to complete that wish, like my wish for you is.
My wish is to be in radical relationship with each other, right? Like, I think that's my wish, is that I know many of you in this room and I don't know everyone, but where I'm going, I desire to be in relationship with those that desire to be in radical relationship in our present moment, and then what we're creating for the future. And I hope that we do that in Richmond in real ways.
My wish. Wish that everybody would truly know themselves. And to fully understand your own identity and who you are and the power that you have, and understand, like, my background's, it's all fashion design, it's all artifice, it's all, what do we put on our bodies, how do we tell people who we are, how do we communicate non-verbally with how we present ourselves. Not that I need everybody to be a fashionista, but like, understand who you are and what you are in your core, and then how do you convey that to everybody else? How do you express what your identity is truly and deeply in everything you do, in just minute decisions, things that you think are cast off decisions. Everything tells a story. Everything is a form of communication.
And with that,
Yeah.
we'll see you next month.
Good job.
That was amazing.